So this is the Samsung HW-S60A soundbar, which is brand new for 2021. Now, if you already have a Samsung TV, or if you're planning on getting a Samsung TV, then you might want to go with the Samsung soundbar, because then this way your TV and soundbar can talk to one another a little better. But regardless, the S60A is going to be better suited for someone who's looking for a more mids and dialogues focused soundbar. Regarding pricing, the S60A retails for $330, which is not bad for a soundbar of this size and capability. Now, in this review, we're going to be evaluating the soundbar by itself, but if you want to, you can always build out this soundbar with an optional wireless subwoofer that retails for $300, which you might need, and you can also add a pair of rear speakers that retail for $150. Nonetheless, the soundbar by itself is perfectly fine for a bedroom or small to medium-sized living room, but if you are looking for that bass, then you are going to want to pick up that subwoofer. Now first, let's go over the design of this soundbar. The soundbar has a fabric mesh covered body with metal end caps on either side, and up top there are physical media control buttons with hidden LEDs that animate themselves when you raise or lower the volume, for the most part. Overall, the soundbar has a very minimal design to it, and thanks to its fabric mesh covered body, you're not going to get any reflections bouncing off of it if you're watching something in a dark room, which can be annoying for some people. However, I do gotta point out that this soundbar is a little on the larger side when compared to its direct competitors, like the JBL Bar 5.0 or the Bose Smart Soundbar 300. The soundbar has a length of 30.1 inches, a width of 4.9 inches, and a height of 2.7 inches. Overall, the soundbar does have a pretty large footprint, but oddly enough, this soundbar is very lightweight, which leads us to the power brick. Unfortunately, the soundbar has an external power brick, which means you're going to have to hide it when you throw it into your setup. Now, I point this out because a lot of newer soundbars don't have external power bricks, which just makes life a little easier. So yeah, I do find it very ironic that even though the S60A has the largest footprint here, it's the only soundbar here with an external power brick, because both the smaller Bose and JBL soundbars don't have external power bricks. But now let's talk about the ports on this soundbar. Overall, it's pretty bare bones back here. There's a DC port for power, there's an HDMI port so that you can hook it up to your TV, and if you need to, there's an optical port if you have an older TV, and there's a micro USB port that's going to go mostly unused. But I do want to point out that this soundbar does come included with an HDMI cable, which is nice. Now, regarding this HDMI port, it's got eARC support, which means if you've got a newer TV with an HDMI 2.1 port, you most likely have eARC support, which means your audio won't be as processed if you were using a standard HDMI ARC port. Now, if your TV doesn't have an HDMI eARC support, then a standard HDMI ARC port is going to work just fine. And when it comes to supported audio formats, this soundbar has support for Dolby 5.1 and DTS 5.1. But now let's talk about wireless connectivity. This soundbar has AirPlay 2 support, which means if you're an iPhone user, as long as your device is connected to the same Wi-Fi network as this soundbar, you can stream music to it from any app. However, just keep in mind your AirPlay 2 connection is contingent on your Wi-Fi connection. So if you were to place the soundbar in an area of the house with spotty Wi-Fi, then you could have connection issues. And unfortunately, this soundbar doesn't have an Ethernet port, so you can't get a wired connection going if you wanted to. However, thankfully, the soundbar does have Bluetooth, so whether the soundbar is in an area of the house with spotty Wi-Fi, or if you just want to easily share your soundbar with a friend so that they can DJ, you can always just use trusty old Bluetooth. But this now leads us to the media controls on this soundbar. Up top, there's a volume up and volume down button, which personally I am a fan of, because then this way you're not solely reliant on your phone or remote control if you're listening to music with this soundbar. But the soundbar does come included with its own remote control, which gives you full control over your media. So you can play or pause your music, you can skip through your music, and you can even select from a few different sound modes as well. And finally, the soundbar does have support if you want it. What is the current price of Bitcoin?
One Bitcoin is worth $50,120 US. Down 12.5% over the last 24 hours.
But it doesn't seem like the soundbar has Hey Google support. But nonetheless, I don't like using voice assistants on my soundbars just to prevent accidental activations when I'm watching something. But now let's talk about sound. First off, I do have to point out that this soundbar is not a part of Samsung's new Q Symphony lineup of soundbars that will use your Samsung TV's built-in speakers alongside the speakers found in the soundbar itself. If you want to get Q Symphony going, you're going to need to get a Q Symphony compatible soundbar with a Q Symphony compatible TV, which means you're going to have to go up Samsung's product lineup. But regarding speaker setups, this soundbar has 3 frontward firing mid-range tweeters, there's a pair of frontward firing woofers on either side, and finally there's a pair of transducers that shoot out the sides that mainly focuses on the mids and highs. Now, before we jump into the sound test, just know that right out of the box, the bass on the soundbar is pretty flat and the mids and highs are pretty bright. So in this sound test, we're going to be using my EQ settings, which you can adjust either through the SmartThings app or if you've got a Samsung TV. You can adjust these settings through your TV's menu UI. I raised the bass and lowered the mid on the soundbar.
Over here and I'm looking straight at the
Some sweet dinner for us.
Let's go.
I get lost sometimes and I can't seem to find a light between the walls I built for myself right in my mind. And then you came over and you showed me love that I never had seen before. And now when I got you, it's all gonna be alright. Tonight, what a time to be alive. Just you and I. Just you and I. Only you. Put the fire around. You. Turn it all around. You. Lift me off the ground. So we can fly again. So we can fly again.
So obviously anything is going to sound better than your TV's built-in speakers. Your TV most likely just has a pair of downward firing transducers that bounce sound off of the table. Now besides your TV's built-in speakers just not being able to get as loud as a soundbar, the biggest issue for your TV's built-in speakers is just going to be the bass. If you're watching a big action set piece in a movie or if you're just gaming, if the bass really gets going, then it's just going to become a rattling mess. Sort of like my voice right now. But nonetheless, this rattling mess does sound awful and it can just take you out of the viewing experience. Whereas bass rattling isn't an issue for this soundbar. However, the bass on the soundbar does lack a lot of physicality. So if you're planning on getting a sound system for your TV and you want to physically feel what's going on the screen, you're either going to want to pick up the wireless subwoofer that I mentioned at the top of this video, or you might want to go with an entirely different soundbar. Now, like I mentioned at the top of this video, the soundbar is better suited for someone who's looking to focus on the dialogue because the soundbar is very mids and highs focused. But unfortunately, I can't help but feel that this soundbar is too mids and highs focused because it does sound a little narrow when compared to its direct competitors like either the Bose Smart Soundbar 300 or the JBL Bar 5.0. Now, like I mentioned earlier, you can go in and adjust the EQ on this soundbar either through the SmartThings app, or you can do it directly from your Samsung TV's menu. But still, even if you were to raise the bass on this soundbar, you're still not going to get too much physicality out of it. And if you were to lower the mids and highs too much, then this soundbar does start to sound shallow. Overall, the soundbar gets the job done, but it is not my favorite sounding soundbar. So with all that being said, the Samsung HW-S60A soundbar is okay and it gets the job done. But personally for me, this isn't high on my list if I were going to recommend a soundbar. From a sound quality standpoint, the soundbar does sound a little narrow and the bass on this soundbar is pretty flat. So you're not really going to feel what's going on the screen unless you spring for the optional subwoofer. But sound aside, the soundbar's rather large footprint and external power brick are minor quirks that also turn me off from the soundbar. If you get a sick deal on the soundbar, or if it comes bundled with your TV, then yeah, the soundbar is fine. But if you're actively shopping around, I'd look at something else. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit that like button and get subscribed. It helps out more than you realize. If you want to pick any of the products up mentioned in this video, those will be linked in the description down below, and you can also support the channel by checking out the merch store. But other than that, I'll catch you next time.